asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
There's going to be a lot of interest in this, so tweet your comments to @Richie Allen Show. It's @Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Okay, that's how to reach me during the programme. Now, I wrote about this today. Quite extraordinary story. I suppose for a lot of people, an extraordinary story. Not so much for people who make programmes like this, or me, particularly because I've been covering this since early 2015. And I've covered it a lot. You know, we've had many people who've come on the programme who've been affected by this. We're talking about people who've had their children taken away from them and put into care. And some of them eventually put into permanent adoption for no good reason. At least after investigating it thoroughly before speaking with the people involved, I could determine no good reason for them to be taken, including our guest this next hour or so, Kellie Cottam. But the story today was in the Mail. I picked up on it and I wrote a bit about it and wrote a few opinions, or I outlined a few opinions. Basically, a nurse has had her 1-year-old taken away from her because she was in a play area with her son, the 1-year-old boy, and a social worker was there and reported the nurse because the nurse let him sit in a toy car that was judged by the social worker to be too small for the baby boy. The social worker said the toy car was inappropriate for him and told the family court judge that she also had concerns about the nurse's basic parenting skills. She observed, as I said, mum and baby in a play area. Now, the judge involved Eleanor Owens, named by the Daily Mail today, which is a good newspaper when it comes to this. It's only the Mail and the Telegraph that has ever really tried to cover this properly, this subject. But the judge was told the social worker didn't feed the boy appropriately and hadn't changed his nappy appropriately. And I mentioned today, not sarcastically but seriously, I wasn't aware that there was a government decree or a manual on how to feed and how to change your baby. And if you breached that, or if you failed to comply with that, you might see your child taken away from you. This is not an exaggeration. Now, the child has been sent to live with relatives, which is not the worst thing in the world. It's wrong, of course, but it could have been a lot worse. The mother will have supervised visits. Qualified nurse, the judge said the mum had an extremely low range of intellectual inability. Can't understand that, to be honest, but that's what's said. So she watched the woman spend about an hour holding her son, who was sitting in a Bob the Builder car, then filed a report. It's resulted ultimately in mum and baby being separated. How traumatic it is, obviously, for the mother, but imagine how traumatic it is for the 1-year-old child who's torn from his mother, doesn't have a clue what's going on. Nobody can explain it. I'm going to play you some audio before we introduce Kellie. It's audio she sent me today. I was aware of it. It's from a Panorama documentary which aired in 2014, summer of 2014. It was an excellent film by Panorama. It was called Exposure, Please Don't Take My Child. Excellent but sad. Excellent in terms of what it revealed, but sad because pressure was later brought to bear on the BBC and it's never really touched it or followed it up again. You're going to hear a man tell the story of the day that social workers and the police came to take his child, and you're going to hear some distressing audio because you're going to hear the mother of the baby, of the 6-hour-old baby, I think. I think the baby was born, it was a home birth. I think the child is not even a day old, and you'll hear him tell what happened, and you'll hear the moment they're taking the baby from the mother, and it's not nice. And if it affects you, you might want to turn down your sound for about 3 minutes. All right, this is Exposed or Exposure, Please Don't Take My Child, Panorama from 2014.
This father had already lost his older children to adoption because he and his wife couldn't cope without support. The decision to take this child was made by the courts before he was even born.
It was a home birth, pretty easy. I held my son. One of the midwives went outside and got on the phone to social services to tell them that there's now a baby boy.
Within just a few hours of the birth, social workers arrived.
Outside the door there was, I think there was 5 or 6 child protection policemen and women trying to convince us to hand over our newborn son. I came in, I put the webcam on to record then.
He secretly filmed social services actions from this point.
I was hoping it would go viral and people would show it all over the internet, hoping that someone will listen. They started drilling the locks out and the whole flat seemed to vibrate.
They drilled the locks out?
Crying because there's a really loud vibration sound. And then the policeman comes in.
If you're proud of yourself, what's the danger? What is the danger? I don't know touching people.
There was no suggestion the baby was in imminent danger, but social services obtained a court order to remove him because they said he could be at risk of future harm.
No danger. Where is the danger?
They're just saying they've got an order, they've got to follow it, they have to follow their orders. So you feel there's nothing you can do to stop it. You feel powerless, useless, worthless.
So can you pass him to me, please?
To me what? I'm trying to help my wife to protect my son from you lot.
You're going to get arrested, aren't you?
I don't care. Do you think I care?
Right.
I think I'm bothered if you arrest me.
And then they started pulling my wife's arms.
No, you're scaring me, which will scare him. Okay, well, I don't mean to scare you. I definitely don't want to scare you. So please pass it.
You're causing trauma. Wants its mum. What do you think the baby wants as soon as it comes out? What's its mum?
And that was it. As soon as I got the baby out the flat.
Would you calm down if someone stole your child?
Goodbye.
Yeah, I've seen that clip and heard it a number of times, and it's as distressing now hearing it as it was the first time. Let's welcome back to the programme Kellie Cottam. It brings a lot of memories back to Kellie, I suppose, who had this happen to her back in 2013. She's a psychology graduate, and as I said, she works tirelessly to raise awareness about this and bring it to the attention of people. Remember, I said 32,000 children a year are taken from their parents. Most of them, not for anything they've done, but for what they might do. Kellie, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
Hello there, Richie. How are you doing? Long time.
Long time. I think August 2015 when you came on. The year after that, I think I did a phone-in where we brought people on who'd experienced it, and I think you joined in for a couple of minutes, but we've not had a proper chat since then. And I know you're going to update us a little bit on what's been happening to you, but before that, not to be in any way melodramatic at all or anything like it, but that can't be easy listening to that. And I know you've seen that documentary.
I had to turn it down, just as you said. Occasionally, sometimes when I forget why I'm doing this and I've been trolled and parents aren't listening and I feel really down, I sit and listen to that and I remind myself that whatever level the parents are at standing up for their own children, it's not about the parents, it's about the children. And I just hold myself in it and I keep replaying it and I keep replaying it, just to keep that why I do this, why I have to keep going, and also remembering that my own children have those silent screams within themselves and can't express themselves. Obviously, through social media, I've been able to deal with my trauma by taking it out on social media, I suppose, and knowing that somebody heard. But what I never expected, and I still am gobsmacked about it on a daily basis, is the amount of people that came forward just by me doing a hashtag. They've got my kids, social services have got my kids, what do I do? I was expecting people to come forward and go, calm down, okay, this is the process, this is what you're going through, this is what happens, this is the team that's going to be around you. understand why they're going through this investigation with you, you know, to really help me see what was going on and understand the trauma I was going through. But it wasn't. In fact, nobody knew what to do. People were out there on the media already. Ian Joseph is the first person that you come across if you Google, you know, social services have removed my children. Straight away, he's telling people to run away. And now what happens if social services, and please, please, please remember, social services, we need them. We need some form of authority and government that is standing up for children when parents are taking children below the threshold.
That's a fact.
Physical, medical, sexual or abuse. We know that parents are abusing their children. We know this. It is fact. Now, what I'm saying is if a parent has caused significant harm to a child, you take them to the criminal courts and you prosecute them for a crime, and then you trust your justice system for people to be rehabilitated, and the children then would be within the family facilities with the proper support, the proper enablement, and, you know, that family shouldn't then be left in a council house on benefits, living in a drone job. That person should be who they are, what they're meant to be about, in their own thriving identity, and coming through the services in a better way than you do on Jeremy Kyle and Super Nanny.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, people are coming into these services because there is actually 2 tiers to social services: child protection and early intervention. And unfortunately, everybody is slipping through this net, and it is automatically going to child protection. Now, I want to sort of bring in, because you know what I'm like, I can go off on tangents and I can talk, and I know
I'll keep you on the straight and narrow, because there's an awful lot I want to get through in the time that we have, and it's going to fly by, right?
It's so complex. This is the challenge. But the thing is, I've been able to see this from many point of views, because 1, I was in foster care myself as a child. 2, I was always on the youth council, so I was always the person who used to mentor and be the person who used to sit next to somebody who was in foster care or adopted. And through my own foster care parents and my foster father, lucky I didn't go to one of your Manchester protests, because he was getting Social Services Award of the Year.
Right.
That would have been really funny. But luckily we had people on the inside of that. Now, we've been able to get a massive big perspective, because people have been trying to bring this out for 30 years. Rest her soul, ITV and Claire, you know, who have been receiving thousands and thousands of letters for years and years and years. And this goes back to the times of the Magdalenes. You know, most people have seen Philomena. If you haven't seen Philomena, please watch it, because we still live under historical law with single mothers, and single mothers fall below the threshold immediately. Now, obviously, everybody wants me to sit here and talk about, well, you know, the government is stealing children and there's this big conspiracy and everything is going on. But we have to bring this back to real truth and facts, that we're dealing with a system that's underfunded. We're dealing with social workers who've never had children. We're dealing with the fact that this is people's jobs. Now, unfortunately, we don't live in a society where I could turn around to my next door neighbour and say, I've just got to pop to the shop. Do you mind looking after my kids? You know, we can't do this anymore. We know.
Hold that thought, Kellie. Hold that thought. Roll back a bit. I'm going to do this to you a few times now. You're going to have to bear with me. Because you've said some important things there, and then if you go further on, I won't be able to come back. You said single mothers are falling under or beneath the threshold. Are you telling me that single mums are being targeted?
Yes, of course, because at the end of the day, we should be living in a society where marriage is first and only. We live on, whatever you think of Henry VIII and his many wives, we live under the C of E value beliefs within this country. Even we know that the princess has had to change denominations in order to marry Harry. She's become C of E, and it was a very religious ceremony. So we do stand under that ethos within Britain, whatever people think. So what actually happens is, if you have a person who is a single mother, especially if they're in foster care, who have no support systems, and it doesn't matter whether that person is, you know, and this also goes to non-married. So bring the fathers into this as well. This goes to people who are not married. if you are married, there is a legal standing immediately for both people having rights. Obviously, fathers don't have to go and sign on the birth certificate. They have automatic rights because the couple is married. In our country, there are so many laws that protect marriage, and I'm glad it does. It's just unfortunately we don't live to those values, and we know we're in the devil's playground, and you know, people don't want family values and marriage and good real love anymore. You know, we're talking about sex and babies conceived out of wedlock, and I'm glad that we have this ethos, and I'm glad that the courts maintain that. But what people are not realising is a father is deemed as a protective factor. Without that protective factor, the mother is considered vulnerable and alienated and on her own. If she can't show that she has solid foundations with her father, that the father is still responsible for the daughter, or even a son if he's standing there on his own, because that happens too now. You know, we don't live in the society now of mum, dad, nan, granddad, as Peppa Pig tries to, you know, educate our children on. That's very confusing for most children now. We have step parents, great grandparents, foster parents, adoptive parents, and next door that we call uncle that we find out years later isn't. But what we don't have is community, and we've been taken over by health and safety and structures and things and the laws and the regulations. Now, I've been on to Caroline Dinenage today, I think she's the Minister of Healthcare, just to sort of let her know the consequences of the actions of these rules and regulations. With Aaron and Faith being taken, they said because I was on my own, my children would be dependent upon a system for any support that I needed because I didn't have family structure. So in the Catholic Church, obviously, if you go back to the historicness of forced adoption, it used to be young single mothers. In fact, my mother was actually probably one of the last generation where this would have happened. My nan was the first person to fight for me to remain with my nan, and my nan forced adopted me. And my mum was one of the first people, and my dad, to annul this. But the way that they annulled it is they got married. The court saw a married couple higher status than one person adopting a child, and it overrid everything because of marriage. I've always said to any couples that are going through social services, if you are not married, go get married, because straight away you're giving the father
Really,
rights.
Kellie? I mean, because this whole society, this whole system, this paradigm that we inhabit, it's a sham. I mean, to have the judiciary and to have political leaders talk about family values and, you know, marriage, it's an absolute sham, because these people don't practice or don't have these values. I'm not disagreeing that these are good values.
I mean,
I'm not.
Look at yourself.
It's a sham, right?
I've made a comment tonight. Now,
yeah.
You know, potentially your wife may have made sure that statement is there, but you've said on your message, "I love my wife, I love my life."
Yeah, well,
isn't that the way that it's meant to be? You know, I know a lot of people are not religious, but the truth is the truth. You know, the Lord basically said that we would be with our parents, and then we would, you know, we would be married, we would be passed over. I mean, look at the royal wedding, taking off on a tangent, but bringing it to, you know, a poignant matter. Her father didn't walk her down the aisle. Okay, we are living in a society now of girls like I am far from perfect. I am the most emotionally damaged person right now, and the consequences of it will last me for my whole life here. It will not heal. It will not go away. I do not get to grieve. I do not get to bury my children. I never got to say bye, and that will stay with me as trauma for the rest of my days. Even the fact that Bumblebee is coming on screen, I know full well that I've got a little boy who's about to get triggered and traumatized because he practically lived for 9 months in a Bumblebee Transformers outfit, and now that program's going to come out. People are not going to recognize the behavior that he's going to be exhibiting. And they know that the trauma of adopting children is so great, because that's why they plumb millions of pounds into it. And it was called, this is how messed up our society is, it was called the Education and Adoption Bill. I said I will stop when it's called the Family and Education and Systems Bill.
But this is Tony Blair who introduced targets. But we'll come to that in a minute. What we're saying here is that people are taking children away from parents based on this ideological view of the world. Based on a threshold.
Yeah. But the threshold document is written by 18th century laws. Even though the police are upholding, I think it's a section 37 or a section 7 of the Children's Act of 1984, correct me, but it's about that time.
Yeah.
But most things are running now under I mean, I can't remember what it is within the social care, but I know within, obviously on the streets, that we've got most people in prison held on remand because of an 18th century vagrant law, which is why people on the streets are being picked up and put into cells. Look, at the end of the day, one of the biggest things that people are not realising, why a lot of children are being taken, and this is the first time I'm going to say this publicly, and I'm probably going to get hit on the head over it, but most of us haven't paid our tax bills. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, we used to live, look, we've got all these nice shiny things. My partner says this to me often, just because you've got your iPad and your nice shiny things, don't think there's not a spiritual war still going on. Don't think that we still don't live in the structures of kings and queens and playing a game of chess, because that is still going on right under our noses. It's just that we've got the people so suppressed. Remember the film Ants?
Yeah,
we all get up, go to work, all get up, go to work, look round in our iPhones. We are just completely blinded to the dogmatic system and the laws that have been upheld, to the point that if a mother, mental health, just to bring it into it, because I've actually had another removal since, but I won. If somebody has concerns for somebody's mental health, it's about who has the right to tell somebody how to behave. So that threshold and those laws is basically government saying this is the way that we choose for you to live, and this is what we need to uphold. If you cross these lines or boundaries, there are consequences. One may be prison. One may be we might stick a needle in your backside and section you because we're going to put you under the Mental Health Act. But this is all in our best interest. That if you look at this visually now and imagine that years ago, not that long ago really, if you think about it, we only came through World War literally 70-something years ago. Peasants were stood outside. On campaigning, I've still been called a peasant. So the lords and ladies are still living by this class divide that exists when we live in the most chaviest society I've ever seen.
You're getting there now, Kellie. I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dream, I wouldn't stoop, I wouldn't condescend to patronise you. I wouldn't dare. But you're getting there, you see. This is where I come from. This is beyond basically there are ideals. The state has an ideal. It has a mental picture of how children should be brought up. That's a cover for what's really going on.
It's not just about how social services feel that parents should be raising their children.
No, it's a cover.
But it's about the fact that we don't live in a society where people take responsibility for their own families. We've got older generation being thrown into old people's homes. And actually, do you know, I hear parents say to their children, if you do not behave, I'm going to get social services,
No way.
I look on a daily basis out my window, I get thousands of people pass me, and I get really annoyed. Why have they not got social services in their lives and I've had to go through it? Why is this person? And I've become really judgmental, Richie.
I can understand
really judgmental, yeah. To the point that I've never ever called anybody a crackhead in my life. I have always believed at the root of any problem there is a crying, desperate person for help. It doesn't matter with drugs, it doesn't matter whether they're abusing themselves. I have always looked at where the root comes from. And the majority of the time it comes from sexual, physical, emotional abuse. Yeah. But if you get to the real root, it comes because they have got and if you give a clinical name, and social services know this, it's called attachment disorder. It means they haven't been loved and nurtured by their mum and dad in the way that they should.
Right,
do.
Now let me jump in there. Kellie Cottam is our guest. Tell you what, Kellie, I didn't expect it to go down this road, but I'm glad it did. This is interesting stuff. Look, I'm going to read a tweet from Patricia Braunschweiler, who's a friend of the program's. For my understanding, tweets Patricia, for my understanding, unless the abuse the child is going through is really horrendous, they are much better off with their own family. The system has to learn how to judge case to case. It's time for the system to invest in children, not wars. Just my opinion. And let me just say this, Kellie. I'll be very brief with this because I've said this to my listeners before. I went through pretty horrendous physical abuse. It was as bad as it can get without murder, effectively. And I'm not, again, no melodrama here. It was horrendous. I still have the scars. And I still have the issue, not psychological issues, but I still have the mobility issues when I go running to prove it. Terrible stuff. It was brutal. If ever a child maybe needed an intervention, I was probably that child. But I'm glad it never happened, because I would have been taken away from my brother and my sister. I would have been taken away from my neighbours, from my school, from my friends. attachment disorders. I'm with Patricia Braunschweiler. Unless there is sexual or physical abuse, the state has absolutely no right to walk into somebody's house and to tell that person how to raise their child. That's how I feel about it. Back to you.
I mean, you can take the Indigenous children in this. At the end of the day, Australia had every right to go in there. Those children had gonorrhea, sexual transmitted diseases. The Western world had to do something about children. And we have to decide at what point, and I'm certainly the sort of mother that if I hear any mother call their child stupid, I am quite likely to land them across the floor, because to tell a child that they are stupid is emotionally scarring them.
It is, but why wouldn't you have a word with the parents? Sorry to interrupt you, Kellie. It is. Look, it's not good, is it?
It's educating them, isn't it?
Exactly.
What right do I have to then turn around to that
to
person
give her a
and say, "You're wrong"?
dig? Exactly.
But if I turned around to her and said, "Are you aware that there is, if you want to go into psychology, which is the biggest,
which is your forte? Go ahead."
I'll rip that to pieces in another radio show. But if you take sort of saying to somebody, look, there is some form of research that shows that words have power. Have you ever seen this really cool experiment where you can have 2 bowls of rice and you can give 1 positive words and 1 negative words, and you've seen how, one flourishes and 1 doesn't. We can prove it. We can scientifically prove it. Power of words is absolutely patent. If you believe in paganism, they've got us locked down in so many curses because of words. But at the end of the day, if I said to somebody, look, okay, now what if I said to you, for the next 30 days, how about you go and tell your child how beautiful, how wonderful, how amazing they are, and then see if their behaviour is wrong. At the end of the day, nobody's got a rule book to be a parent.
No.
Most people go to Super Nanny. I've seen people go to Super Nanny where on Super Nanny you've got parents holding the door down, you little fucking shit, I'm going to kill them. And you know what? They come out the other side with the tools and the strategies to work with the boundaries with their children. And never is there an option when she comes in, is she going, I'm taking your child. When a social worker ends into any person's life, I have always said it should be like rose petals. Whatever you're going through, you should be able to say to a social worker, I want to smash the fucking house up. I can't cope. Because every person should be able to ask for help as and when they need it. It doesn't matter if somebody's feeling suicidal. It doesn't matter if somebody's feeling ill. We live in a world where people don't want to deal with other people's drama. People don't want to help other people unpack the challenges that they've gone through. And living with sexual abuse or any trauma as a child is shameful. We all go through the experiences of shame. We don't live in a society that is touchy-feely. Let's talk about how we feel about things. And psychology is living in a world of labelling and judging. And this is the problem with the threshold document, bringing it back to what happens in court. It doesn't matter what you go through. I can give you every label. I have a physical condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, label 1. I have a learning style diagnosis of Asperger's, threshold 2. I also am diagnosed with borderline personality, threshold 3. I have also been in foster care. The fact that I've worked with the system before is seen as a negative, not a positive.
Black marks against you.
Black mark against me. Yeah. I have been through sexual abuse. Therefore, straight away, what am I? I am a risk narcissist.
Of future, and you're a risk of future emotional harm, they say.
Because psychology says that those abused go on to abuse.
Do you agree with me, Kellie?
This dogmatic society.
Do you agree with me? You see, Ian Josephs, whom I know you love dearly and you've had a lot to do with, and I've had him on several times. I had him on in a debate recently with a solicitor from I can't remember where, from up north somewhere, further north of me. You see, I think there are 2 things going on here. They're not trying to protect the child from Kellie, who was abused, who was in foster care, and who's on the spectrum. They're not, Kellie.
They're trying to protect themselves from being sued.
And, well, you see, again, it's good that we found something to disagree with. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to disagree with you, and then you can come back. For me, it's about 2 things. Firstly, and kind of on a lesser scale, it is a it's a £1 billion a year industry, number 1.
Of course it is.
And number 2,
it's an employment racket.
It's an employment racket, and I know that you don't agree with this, and I absolutely respect that you will not agree with this, because I come from a different place. Doesn't mean I'm right. I'm not arrogant, but I believe that there's an agenda to destroy the family, Kellie.
Agenda 21, we know this,
right?
To be true. I don't disagree with you.
So one of the ways to do that is to destroy the natural bond between mother and child, and find reasons.
Agenda 21 written? It was not written currently.
No.
It is old school dealing with the new school, relaying the same, and people in jobs and positions that don't have the power or the even stance, because most people won't do things for free, that most people won't get out of bed unless they're paid. So unless you've been through something, you're not on the front line doing it. And at the end of the day, nobody's willing to push it further, to stand there and go, hang on a minute, why are we all agreeing to this? One of the biggest problems with social services is everybody sits around a circle, right? Every midwife will tell me the same thing. I've just worked with Portsmouth Social Services and they've been amazing, absolutely brilliant. And they have listened and learned and done everything to make sure that, you know, we've got our two boys, you know, and what, sorry?
And you got things changed.
Yeah, we got massive change just by working with them, didn't we? I mean, they certainly didn't want to push it with us. I think they knew the complications with that. But
who was that in the background, Kellie?
Oh, that's my partner who just reminded me of something.
Good evening, partner.
Good evening, partner.
Good
He's
evening,
a mysterious man who literally rescued me from Downing Street.
Who shall not be named.
But he was the protective factor.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the other thing is, one of the things that Portsmouth did that was very different is when I sat there and said, if you come through my door, you will go out with a bullet to your head. They never went and got me sectioned. They never went and got the police. They sat down and they said, we don't understand how this feels to you. They would refuse to tell me whether they had children at the time. Nobody. I kept asking everyone, have you got kids? I need to understand. Do you have kids? You don't know what this feels like. And I would say to any person out there who does have a child or who's been responsible for somebody who has a child, if you're walking around a shop and then all of a sudden a child moves in a different direction and you've gone past the, you know, so-and-so, come here, where are you? And then all of a sudden you're going to, where are they? Parents like us who've had children taken, exactly the same as people who are in the family courts for denied contact or parent alienation, even grandparents who are separated because of, they all go through it.
Kellie, I'll tell you what I want to do.
Innate bond to your child, that pain never goes away. That's the feeling, like the mother that you heard screaming and the baby that you heard screaming. That pain never goes away. And we are dealing with a very fragmented society now, and that number is going to keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. It's getting worse.
32,000 a year.
And until we come in and intervene, now I'm doing quite a lot. We have had, now when I spoke to you last time, obviously I was going off with my partner. We, you know, at the time we were both living out on the streets campaigning. We had a car that somebody had donated to us, and obviously I found out I was pregnant. You know, we didn't know what to do. Were we going to run? Were we going to stay? We chose to work with the system. I've had a totally different perspective because also, I don't want to get more involved with this side because I also do agree with the right to a private life. But it's given me a great education because in September I had a wrongful removal of me and my son, and I was detained under the Mental Health Act, and I was imprisoned, and my son was removed. And I got to see this from a complete mistake, and I have this now in the court processes. But one thing that this done to me is I've got a solicitor involved in taking action against them. And when he sent me the forms, I went, really? Is that all I had to do? It's that easy. And what people need to understand is when social services come into your life, they will either send you a letter to say that we have cause for concern.
Kellie, do me a favour, hold that thought, because this is dynamite stuff, particularly what happened to you in September and how you were able to use the system to prevent you losing this
We got him back
baby.
5 days later on Bank Holiday Monday.
That's magnificent. I didn't know that. Right, hold that thought, 'cause I have to take a break, right? When we come back, we'll talk about that specifically. And you talked about, you know, what people can do when they get that letter. That is educational. So we'll do that when we come back. And then I want to talk to you about the amount of children, because they are children, who go missing from care every year. This is one of the biggest unspoken, uncovered stories in the country. All these children go missing, and you've obviously been through the care system yourself as a youngster. So we'll do that. Kellie, we got about 2.5 minutes break and grab a glass of water. A glass of water there. Kellie Cottam is our guest. She'll be back with me in a minute. What she's going to be talking about when we come back is educational, how you can possibly beat them when those letters come, when social services start knocking on your door. 14 minutes past the hour, Wednesday, June 6th, 2018. It's your Richie Allen Show live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. Tune in radio, richieallen.co.uk, triggerwarning.tv as well. 2.5 minutes, back with more from Kellie.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Remarkable lady on the line this hour. Kellie Cottam is live with us. Psychology graduate, went through the nightmare. I suppose the scenario that most parents, please God, most parents will never understand, will never imagine, but having children taken away from her back in 2013, wrongfully, based on the future risk of emotional harm. She explained why I did, Kellie. I've also tweeted a link out with Kellie's story on it. It's punishmentwithoutcrime.wordpress.com. It's an article, a detailed article about what happened to Kellie. It's all there. She's our guest. We've been talking about forced adoption, the family courts. Unbelievable story today in the press, covered on our website, about a nurse whose child was taken and given to relatives, and she's given supervised visits because a social worker happened to be in a play area and took notes observing the nurse's interaction with her child. It's incredible. It's a tyranny. Covered a lot with Kellie. Kellie's had a child since we last spoke with her, a baby, a very young child. That's marvellous news. But as you heard just before the break back in September, Kellie began to go through it again. Unbelievable, Kellie. So this happened again in September, but the outcome was different. How?
Well, actually, before we came here. I was on your show, and then we left, and we turned to the council and sort of said, look, this is our situation, because I was born here, and actually they were really good about it. But straight away they made the referral to social services. And I wasn't exactly very forthcoming or amicable, and I did find it really scary because I had so many people saying, you're mad, run, you can't stay, social services are going to do this. And the difference was I wasn't in that situation for the first time. If I'd been in that situation for the first time, I would have been absolutely hysterical. And I did actually take my partner down to Screaming to be Heard because I wanted to get the advice from these so-called people who so know what they're doing. And Maggie Tuttle's reaction was, you're a baby maker for the state. And Ian Joseph just told me to run away. And it's like, well, this isn't the way to do it. You mentioned that I don't like Ian Joseph.
I didn't say that at all. No. I said you'd have a lot of respect for him, yeah.
You said I really love him very much.
I would have thought so, yeah.
But what I will say just on that matter, just to keep it on here, what gives me grave concern with what he does is he doesn't look at people's current situations and places them in more vulnerable situation. We have to accept that some people do need help. Some people do need to receive counselling, and some people have got trauma to go through. And just 2 seconds, excuse me. Just as me now, My voice is very gruff because I am currently going to physio. My EDS is kicking in. You know, we do come, you know, people do burn out. It does happen. Fine, Kellie. And we should be able to work with this system, because at the end of the day, the system is there for us. Now, we're not peasants standing out the gate at the Queen anymore. We have human rights. We have laws that protect us. We've advanced, as I believe, from, you know, wherever we've advanced from.
Well, Kellie, these people are tyrants. These people are tyrants. They don't care about the law. And that's where Ian Joseph is coming from.
It's draconian orders as well. It's draconian orders.
Yeah.
Mine was a draconian order. But what was different was I understood what a Section 47 was.
What is a Section 47? What is it?
Section 47, basically it gives power to social services to be able to basically come and say hello to you and ask you if they can come and ask you if everything's okay. Okay?
Right. Now, I would say don't let them in. That's what I would say. But what do I know? Go ahead.
The problem with, look, and people like Tracy Morris, seriously, girl, get a grip. I want to strangle that woman.
I don't know who she is now.
You cannot tell social services to get off your doorstep and go away.
Why?
Because I guarantee you, do you know what you've just done? You've just had your child taken.
Because you'll bring them on you, basically.
The parents have just caused that themselves, because straight away what they will do, it's not like saying, hey, I'm coming along to see if you've got any stolen goods, and you say no. But at the end of the day, if they think you've got stolen goods in there, they're going to go and get a warrant. Now, they don't have cause for concern because it's just stolen goods, but they might be thinking, hey, you've got to shift them quickly. But it's exactly the same with a child. At the end of the day, that person's got to go home with peace of mind that everything's okay. They have a job to do. And the problem is the majority, and we've just had it again, yeah. I nearly got hit by a car. Me and Dean were having a right rant about, you know, what was going on in this area. Bang, bang, bang. We get the police on our door. We believe that you're arguing. Everything's okay. But what is the due process? The due process, because of multi-agency, is to make that referral to social services. All social services are receiving is a piece of paper of what has come on that record, and then from there the first thing they get is your medical notes. Now, what I keep saying to MPs and Parliament people is, and the courts, is when you get medical notes, you are not getting a balance of that person. Nobody goes to the doctor to say, hey, I'm well today.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so you're only getting, what they do is they create a genealogy. Once I've got quite a few videos, because this is quite a long process to explain this, but I have a few videos that I've put on YouTube where I've explained what a Section 20 is. Don't sign them. But if you do sign them, there's a lot of people, just to say, one of the biggest things that we've actually pushed for is there are a lot of children in foster care that have been remaining in foster care illegally on a Section 20. Social services only actually have 24 hours to respond to every inquiry. After that, they have to either throw it away or throw it to the courts. Police, once they come in, if they do a removal, they can only get that order granted for 72 hours, as long as you understand the process that you're in. And one of the things I'm trying to educate colleges, universities, and within the structures of the training is, when you're dealing with a parent, you've got to realise you are approaching a lioness. You can't just come in with, hey, I'm the social worker, happy-go-lucky, and by the way, I've got a nice little letter here that says that if you don't speak to me, I could take your kids. Remember, social services do not have power to take children. No social worker, unless you hand your children over yourself, which they do coerce. They do. In fact, I don't think they even understand. I don't think they understand. At the end of the day, they go through their training. They think that you know what they know. Because at the end of the day, if you have a child and we live in a society, it's your responsibility to know the laws that your children are in. If you put your child into an education system, you have the responsibility of the parent to know who those people are, what they're about, and what situation you've just put your child in. It's only the police that can remove the children, and it's only either done by child protection order or by a court-granted order.
Yeah, okay, because the social worker runs to a family court judge and, you know, will say, we have reason to believe this, or we have reason to believe that. The problem you have...
change that. Social workers don't have the power to go to the courts. You still there?
Yeah, of course I am. Yeah, explain to me then.
Okay. Social workers don't have the power to go to the courts. What you have to remember is within every organisation there's a structure. With every social worker there's another social worker or a manager, and then you have the administration people. Social workers are just witnesses.
Of course, so it's social services as a whole then. So
yeah, they're just
that's what I should have said.
And one of the problems is once a social worker comes in, how transparent is a parent really going to be?
You see, where we might disagree, I think it's a tyranny beyond anything I've ever come across. That somebody...
Of course, you have to accept...
Let me just explain this much, right? And then I'll shut up. I think it's a tyranny beyond anything I've ever come across that some woman or some man can come knocking on your door and say, I want to see your child. Excuse my French now, Kelly. My response is, who the fuck are you to want to come and see my child?
I said exactly the same to the social worker.
As you should have
how
said.
Would you feel if I knocked on your door and said, you and your partner were arguing this evening, is everything okay? I said, you'd bang that door closed and you'd send me out.
Well, you said the police earlier on. The police can't come to your house without reasonable grounds. They have to have a warrant. How can a social worker knock on a door? Oh, we know you had a baby 2 weeks ago. We're coming around to check everything is fine. My response is, if I'm to be honest, Kelly, there's a lot of bravado here. My response is not actually to say fuck off. My response is to politely say, listen, I have a doctor. My family doctor is taking care of all those needs. Ta-ra now. Bye-bye. It's as simple as that.
But you don't legally have to have a family doctor. I've got two boys that aren't immunised. And social services have actually been cool with the fact that we don't have children that are immunised. We educated them, but they turned around and said, it's your responsibility. We can't tell you whether you have your child immunised or not. What's going on is there's too much fear, and not even that. There's a lot of illiterate people out there, and it's like narcissism. Yeah, I've seen narcissism thrown around and used as a weapon so much. But lizards, okay, you know, even all the lizard stuff. If you take what that actually is, they're talking about the amygdala within the brain, which creates a structure based on trauma, and people become very cold-faced, and they call them the lizards.
Yeah.
So people are taking words and they're taking the meaning and they're relating it to themselves, just like people do with the Bible, just like people do with everything. And people don't have the intellect and the understanding to break it down. I was expelled from school. I've had to go through uni. I probably didn't understand most of what they said. I was probably stoned a lot of it as well. I'm not an intellect. I'm not a graduate in the way that a lot of people think. I've just literally been on a search personally because I had so many psychologists, so many counsellors.
You have to go through loads
so
of
many
them.
foster carers.
Yeah, I've been through it as well.
So many social workers, all wanting to know what was wrong with me, all just writing down paperwork, having meetings without me there. Nobody ever asked me, and I didn't really want to talk to them about it. And I wanted to understand why therapy wasn't working for me, what was wrong with me. I am a narcissist. My partner will tell you that I can be bloody abusive sometimes with my trauma, usually when I'm protecting forced adoption, because a lot of people want to take me away from it.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you're unfit to parent, though. This is the thing. And look, this...
Well, I'm clearly not. At the end of the day, I've got a 22-year-old who's had his own son. I've got a 19-year-old. Both of my boys are independent. In fact, my 19-year-old is at university, who runs his own farm with his girlfriend and the father, who has been self-employed since he was 16. Aaron and Faith were taken, who at the time of being taken at 2 and 3 were both potty trained day and night. Both were speaking, both were articulate, both were well rounded. Kellie,
let me remind the listeners what you're talking about here, because we're jumping backwards and forwards between things.
But I still have 2 children now, and
you have 2 children now,
twice.
And you had children taken away from you that you don't have custody of back in 2013 for nothing. Children whom you never raised a hand in anger against them, you never harmed them, because the tyrannical state decided that because of your experiences, because of your condition, you represented a risk of future emotional harm. It's a tyranny when we have a situation.
Because I said, she said, if we don't help you out, what's going to happen? I said, I'll end up smashing the Xbox up or killing the kids.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it.
Yeah, but how many parents say stuff like that?
I didn't mean it. I didn't expect to like have this phone call and I've got to take them up to the hospital, get them checked out, and then have a police officer because a mother is going, no bruises, goes, mother's just threatened to harm child, and next thing I've got a police officer in front of me saying, if you don't hand your children over, we're going to take them and you're not even going to say bye. I'm trying to ring an actual solicitor that I know who's a family, and he's telling me no.
Kelly,
and
let me just...
thing I know, I'm gagged.
And you're gagged, of course, yeah. And I want to mention again, I've put the link out on Twitter if you want to read Kelly's story. Kelly, I grew up on a street in Waterford City, and a friend of mine, when we were younger, he had a mother who'd been separated. There was no divorce in Ireland at the time, so she was separated, and she was living with her new boyfriend. He was a good guy, and my friend, who would have been 11 or 12 at the time, he had to sometimes listen to his mum go off the deep end because his mum suffered from a type of depression, and every now and then she'd go into rages and she'd scream and shout and bawl and all that, and we all knew that in the neighbourhood. We all knew that. But I remember years later when we were growing up talking to my friend about his mum, and he said how much he loved her and how much he loved looking after her, and how he was able to understand what was wrong with her and what she was going through and all of that, and he'd never swap her for any mother in the world. Now I know, if you fast forward to 2018, and if you put those people into a town in this country, he'd have been taken away from his mother, and that was wrong.
It's a catch-22. I mean, children are being left that should be taken, and children taken that shouldn't be. And a lot of people can say yes because they're not adoptable. At the end of the day, I speak about adoption, and most people are going to adoption because obviously they're saying the parent is unfit to look after the child, and every other family member is deemed not accountable. Just to say to other parents out there, if you're not parties to proceedings, you're not recognised in the courts. You have to be parties to proceedings to be able to say that you're there to support your family members. Just make sure people know that. But at the end of the day, I'm exactly the same. My mother was 15 when she got pregnant. She was given the pill when she gave birth. There was a traumatic birth. She never bonded with me. I was given to my grandmother. I've been through sexual abuse with an uncle. I've been through a gang rape when it all came out. I've been through these lists of things. But at the end of the day, you can't turn around and say to my parents that, what your child has been through is your fault. Now, Jonas was taken because of... They said that her mother failed to protect her daughter from sexual abuse. Well, how's that the rest of the children's problem? Yeah. And why? And how do we protect our children from sexual abuse in such a vile world right now? Because, one of the things that we're dealing with is a massive sexualization world. Even breastfeeding. I've got a business called Naturally Feeding, so I'm trying to get it rebranded at the moment because, give the breast back to the men and let's make something natural, because this is where sexual boundaries start. We're not taught about sexual boundaries. We're not taught about a family ethos. Most people are not, don't have role models, yet we're pointing fingers at people later because we're saying, hey, you were in foster care. That's your fault, by the way, and we failed you. So we're now going to take your children away and we're going to cause double trauma. And then we're going to do the same to your children because we've got paperwork on your family and you're now marked.
Yeah. Well, on that, right, hold that thought on that, because I wanted to bring it around to this because we've got about 14 minutes left and time is going to fly, because you've experienced this from every angle, and I don't know of anybody else who has experienced it from every angle. Talk to us then. You've been tweeting out, by the way, I'm going to tweet a link to where you can follow Kellie on Twitter. In fact, if you put Kellie, which is Kellie, Cottam, Cottam, there isn't any other Kellie Cottam on Twitter, you'll find her.
Just make sure, any men out there, that my fella is an absolute protective factor. And if anybody sends me any messages that are not in relation to stuff and aren't willing to bypass him, I can't respond to them.
He's coming round. Right, now, thousands and thousands of children, in fact, nearly 10,000 a year, are going missing permanently in the care system. Black and white now, Kellie. Don't put flowers on it. Why are they going missing? Why are 10,000 children, not adults, leaving, running away from the care system? Why?
Child trafficking.
Yeah. So when I interviewed...
but there is a percentage of runaways, but what are they running away from?
Right. So John Wedger, I didn't doubt him for a minute, by the way, former police constable, former investigator, was on this programme a few weeks back. Everything John said is right. They're being trafficked out of care homes.
I actually started way before Faith and Aaron were taken, and not a lot of people know, because it was just one of these organisations that, you know, when you used to pay so much money to them to help sponsor families and things like that. And I got involved for a church because they come along and talked about their cause, and that was Hope for Justice. And Hope for Justice, that's where the red X comes from. I always wear my red X for End It. It actually comes from an End It program about child trafficking and trafficking.
Who's trafficking? Who is trafficking these children? Who is? I don't mean individual names. Give me an idea. Are we talking about gangs, mafia? Who is it? Eastern Europeans?
You're talking
What's
about
going on?
such a fragmented system where parents are setting their own children up to be trafficked, where children are being kidnapped off the streets to be trafficked, where parents are sending their children somewhere that they feel is safe, and people are taking these children off with somewhere. One thing that was really clear within the media, and they've only really been speaking about missing children since 2015, was that the majority of them went missing within 24 hours, untraceable. A lot of them were found. They tend to be runaways. What people forget is we talk about the people who were sexually abused and who have been trafficked, but we don't talk about the people who got away. We don't talk about the children that are still living on the streets as homeless people because they ran away from foster care because they were going to be abused or taken off somewhere. There's a lot of stuff on the press that obviously it's coming from another nation. I'm not going to even give you the nationalities that are being used because I will get absolutely, ruled, and I don't have enough information to arm myself from.
Well, I can say it. I follow this. I've been following it for years. I can name these nations. I have no problems. There are countries in the Middle East. There are Eastern European countries like Ukraine, and others.
Well, I will say the
Congo. Yeah.
I mean, what people need to remember is just with adoption and foster care alone, the UK made a public apology in 2010 just for children being moved, and that is literally they were being moved and shipped from our country over to Canada and New Zealand just to place them with other people. Now, my partner always says to me, he said, Kellie, they just need to pull their computers in, get things done, check all the offshore adoption agencies, take this away. I actually spoke at something, and I don't like always doing this because you've got young parents listening to you right now who are currently, and please, if anybody here right now is currently in social services process right now and needs to go through that, I would suggest you click out. And the reason that I say that is because it's okay to be armed with knowledge but not be inundated with it. And what it will do is it will put you in such fear that you don't know where your children are. Look, I don't even know if my children are alive, other than the fact that every year I get a letter about my children. Nothing that you couldn't learn on social media that I talk to you about. Until I see my children, I don't know are my children alive. I don't know if my children have been trafficked. I don't know if my children are with somebody who is doing anything to them. And God forbid anybody has done. But I do get letters that show good growth and process. But my children are not the same people. Now, but the thing is, this is happening. And it's even happening within each family. So you can't sort of say what it depends how you define trafficking. Trafficking is basically moving any person without their permission. Police are trafficking people into mental health. People are trafficking them into prisons. Basically, it's anyone who's pushing you into a direction and causing traffic, So what we're talking about is child exploitation. So you need to cover it as a whole, because children are not just being taken from foster care and, hey, we're never seeing them again. Some children, a lot of care homes don't exist now, and they are shutting down care homes left, right and centre, and thank God they are. We should never. I've seen a picture.
What are they replacing them with, Kellie?
Detained in cells.
In cells. Sorry? If they're closing down foster homes, by the way, there are two things that have come out of what you just said there. One, obviously MPs, some MPs, a Labour MP in particular, was complaining that children were being placed hundreds of miles away from their place of origin, which is obviously a huge problem for the child.
They did that with me.
They did that with you, right? But hang on a second. Hang on a second. You've just said something that I wasn't aware of. I've got to pull you up on this. I don't doubt you at all. I want to pull you up on this. You're saying that it's not just the case that children might be taken away from mum, dad, or mum and dad, sent hundreds of miles away, maybe to Dover or maybe up the north of Scotland. They're actually being sent overseas.
Yeah, they were. There was an apology in 2010.
Is it still going on?
It's still going on. But
Right.
then don't forget, people seem a bit appalled about that, but you don't seem appalled about Angelina Jolie going over to a country and adopting a child. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I am,
people
but
think
I know
it's
what you're
great
saying.
when but Angelina
Madonna.
has still taken a child from a mother. If that was me and I went over to that country, I'd be asking that mother, what do you need to raise your child yourself? If you've got that level of money, then you support the family, not just the child.
So
people aren't appalled about that, but they're appalled about, other people going and taking children. I mean, it can happen in many ways as well, fathers leaving. But I think the main point that people need to really understand is our government is talking about historic child abuse. We have been trying to prove that it's current. The Rotherham reports itself actually state that they accept that this is current. They are accepting that they have been in and busted these rings already, and they are taking children out by the hundreds. They're not just taking 1, 2, 3 children out. They are taking children out by the hundreds, 250, 300. Yeah, the police are admitting that they are going into current busts now here in the UK, where they are finding children being held in appalling situations for the intention of selling them for sex and for slavery here in United Kingdom right now.
Here's a question for you. We're going to run out of time really quickly. You've got about 4 minutes left. Here's a question. We'll do this again in the autumn, with your permission, of course. I won't leave it as long to invite you back. I'll get you back on in the autumn, because this will be very prescient. It's a great word. I learned that word recently, prescient. It'll be very prescient in September when children are going back to school. How many of these social workers do you think? And look, I know that not all social workers are horrible people looking to take kids away so that they can get their bonus. I'm not saying they're all like that. How many social workers do you think have any idea what happens to the children that they remove, in terms of the horrors of foster care, the horrors of foster homes, and now what we're talking about, trafficking? How many of them do you think will have any inkling it's going on?
Richie, absolute blessings to the British Association of Fostering Adoption, right? I have been working with them for the last 2 years with the adoption inquiry, right? And they are devastated. They are devastated. This is good social workers who have had enough of having their hands tied, being bound. A lot of them have quit the services and gone over to work for BAFA to change laws. There is some amazing social workers. I have them crying with me of what has happened and how this is going on. And the actual offshore side that's coming in, at the end of the day, there are offshore adoption agencies. Yeah. There are people actually adopting children in order to be able to offshore. Because once a child is adopted, they can do what they want. They're gone. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Kellie, do you see these people that you just described there? You said that you're working with adoption, people who work within the adoption system.
Not being paid as in working out, collaborating.
No, fair enough.
Cause.
But
I'm pushing their asses to get the inquiry, and they agree.
Now, you just said there, and I don't doubt you, you said there that when these people hear what happened to you and what happened to others, they're crying, they're really upset. With respect, Kellie, I would say, well, you can stick your crying up your arse. You've got to blow the whistle on it. You've got to go to national media and report on it. There's no point in saying, oh, Kellie, it's terrible what happened to you. Got to do something about it.
Yeah, but this was when I was arrested with David Cameron, right? When they were fingerprinting
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when it was a runner apparently. When they were fingerprinting me, I had a woman who did the fingerprinting, and I was telling her my story, and she was crying. I then had 8 officers at the door because they wanted to take my cross off me, and I basically said no. And I stood there and I said to them, "What is the difference between you two?" I said, "She is crying." I said, "But she's not in your militant uniform, is she? And you guys are listening to the same stuff and not one emotion. When you put that uniform on, when did you get rid of your heart, your mind and your soul?" And that's the difference that we're dealing with. And when people take that uniform off and realise that social workers live next door to you, nurses live next door to you, your postman lives next door to you, who you probably don't even say hello to every day that he delivers your mail. But all these people within a community create a society which creates a system that we abide by to respect boundaries. And that's all our government is. The monarchy is nothing more than a merchandise. And government, actually, I can ring them up and say, hey, what's the minister's email? I need to speak to them. And actually, it's very forthcoming and it's done within seconds, just as you guys can. Most people do not realise that we can walk through government gate and lobby people, and people work for them. The MPs are just as appalled. I mean, I do the whole Red X. People know I vote for no confidence, people over parties, all that sort of stuff is another movement that I'm about. But I get the MPs on every day. And what people feel is they don't know what to do about it. And this brings this back, and it's probably a good way of wrapping your show down, is do you wait for a child to be abused? Or do you take a child from a situation that you know is going into fire? And how do you as an individual understand and know somebody when people are finding out that they don't know people at all? So we are reliant on social services, and we are reliant on psychological profiling in order to know whether somebody is at risk of significant harm. But would you as an individual, if you knew, I had a situation the other day and I said to my partner, did you see that? I could have sworn I saw a drugged girl coming out of somebody's house, and I said, did you see that? And I'm getting told off for intervening in situations because I do this. And it's racking my brain. Was there a child coming out of that house in a very dangerous situation? So what do? Do I ring the police and send them in there, or do I go through the door myself? Or do I walk away and say, it's none of my responsibility, it's not my child, they have a right to a private life, they can do what they like to that child behind that doors? And how do we as human beings, if we're already uproared that what's happening to parents now, and people have decided, hang on, we need to talk about this, how do we leave a child inside a house, whether it be a foster carer, whether it be an agent that's doing this, or whether it be its own parents, whether it's at school or whether it's on the streets being bullied by another child, because children are raping children. You know, people don't talk about peer on peer, you know, so this whole world is in chaos right now. We get this, we accept this. And we have a duty and responsibility. The world is a beautiful place. Stop talking about changing the world. It's the people in it, but it's trauma.
Next time you come back, you and I will have a ding-dong about this, because I think we disagree fundamentally. And that's no bad thing, by the way, that we come from different places. The reason why families and the reason why things are in the way that you described, and your description was absolutely perfect, is because it's by design. And I will say that to my dying death,
but
right?
It's by design, by 400-year-old century laws, that if we as the people turn around and say, with the Bill of Rights that's coming in, that we're going to draw a new clean slate, when we exit the EU, we're going to rewrite all of our laws and statuses, we won't have this available to us, and the new people will bring forward new empowering laws, and that can actually be done, because like I've said, it was an agenda, of course it was, 400 years ago. People are only just learning about the one world order that existed 400 years ago. They're not trying to bring it together. It already exists.
Kellie, do me a favour. First of all, thanks for coming on today. I asked you this afternoon.
Welcome, Richie.
I didn't give you a lot of time to prepare, but you don't need it. I'm delighted. It's lovely to hear your child in the background, by the way. I really mean that.
Oh, just trying to, yeah.
It's brilliant.
You know what,
it's
all
lovely.
he does is laugh. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, plenty of us, there's loads of us now who were campaigners who've gone off. My boys don't replace my children one iota. I think about them every day. We celebrate their birthdays. I do my videos. I continue to learn and campaign. You know, but I've had to go through the system these last 2 years, and everything we do is to protect our children.
I'm glad it worked out for you.
From everything.
I'm glad it worked out for you with your baby there, and everybody who's been listening tonight, who's been tweeting, and we've had an enormous amount of tweets, obviously still very upset on your behalf about what happened to you 5 years ago, and hopefully there'll be retribution. I don't mean retribution in terms of revenge, but that will be put right before too long, you know. We're just about to wrap up.
I'm happy to speak anywhere, Richie. It's just that I will not be anything that's against. I don't want to feed the problems. We accept the problem. Government accept the problem. One thing I will say is we worked hard to get that inquiry, and only 54 parents came forward. Now, we've got another window coming through soon, and people people have got to start to realise that we can't be fighting this system right now. We can't be taking this system down. You can't replace Babylon with Babylon. But we have to now work with this system to say how this all should be going, and just realise that we're people that just need to be doing good things in the right places and moving to the solutions. But it does take people like us to come out and say how this has affected us, but not in a drama woe is me way, because there's children involved in this. And please, before I go, any person who trolls me, you troll my children. So what you take out on me, you're taking out on my kids. And I do have 2 older boys who do miss their brother and sister, who do watch my social media. And obviously, you know, our boys here are paramount and our life is paramount. But I will speak in any platform. Protests and banner waving and all of that stuff, great, but it's not the public that we need to be working with. You've got to be going at Parliament. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you believe in this, if you stand for ending this, you know, if you want to bring all this stuff to an end, then we have to realise that we're not against each other. Stop fighting each other and actually work together. But we need each other's stories properly.
Next time you're on, we'll talk about that aspect of it in more depth. Kellie, really appreciate your company this evening. Thanks for doing it. All the best to you, and speak to you real soon.
I'll let people know when the class action is all ready. We've got the human rights solicitors
and we report on it then.
And it will move forward, with time.
Thanks, Kellie. Cheers for that. Bye for now. Kellie Cottam live on the line to us this evening from her home, and you heard her gorgeous child in the background there with her extraordinary story, hers, and well, it's not over yet. It's 9.5 minutes to the top of the hour. A lot of tweets came in on that. A number of people expressed surprise at this going on. I think Jason tweeted me a short time ago. Let me find Jason's tweet, by the way. In the interest of balance, Richie, I'm not saying this is not going on, but as someone who was closely involved with a social worker, I don't recognise any of the allegations being touted. Says Jason. Thanks for that, Jason. Of course, I don't doubt you for a minute. I don't doubt that you don't recognise that any of it is going on. And if you're involved with a social worker, you know, I'm sure the person you're involved with is, you know, is a decent human being and tries to do right by people. But the fact is 32,000 children are taken into care every year. That's, if you just think about that, just think about that number, 32,000 people. That's a football stadium full of children that are taken away from parents. And the statistics bear out this, that the majority of them are not being taken because of physical or sexual abuse ongoing. The majority are being taken for the reasons I outlined in the article I wrote today. Risk of future emotional harm, because the mother had issues, because the mother had a difficult life herself. Kellie outlined her own story, because she was in foster care herself, because she was on the spectrum. Risk of future emotional harm, Nostradamus stuff. We're going to intervene now because there's a chance that in the future you might cause future emotional harm to your child. How could you possibly quantify future emotional harm? Who gives any man or woman the right? What gives them the right to suggest that you might, you know, cause emotional harm in the future? What constitutes emotional harm? You know, shouting at a child when a child has done something wrong, even swearing at a child, is that good enough to say we've got to intervene there and take the child away? I grew up in the Republic of Ireland. You've heard that one before. You know, I know it's a cliche about the Irish and swearing, and we play on it, and I play on it sometimes. But people swore in working class communities. You know, if you watch that Alan Parker film, the Roddy Doyle book, The Commitments, that's the way parents carried on. It's a comedy, but that's the way it was. You know, there was always somebody shouting, but did it cause emotional harm? Now, outside of the physical abuse I put up with, the shouting and all the rest of it, I wouldn't say it constituted emotional harm. I'm a generally laid back person, but certain things get me wound up. I can become highly strung and I can raise my voice. Does it mean that I'd be unfit to parent? I mean, I'm pretty certain, in fact I am certain, that, you know, if I was looking after our child, I certainly wouldn't be swearing, let alone shouting at our child. I've got a lot of patience with children. I used to look after children through football coaching and stuff. And I know it's different, you hand them back at the end of the day and all of that, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do any of that. But what gives any social worker the right to turn up on somebody's doorstep and ask for access? Oh, you had a child a couple of weeks ago, we're just turning up to make sure everything is all right. Who the fuck are you? Based on what? What have you heard? What do you know? Nothing? Will go away then. Baby's doing really well, thanks. In fact, she's asleep now. Got a little bit of soft, relaxing music on in the background. She's having a snooze. Don't need you here. Don't want you here. These people are out for your children. Not every social worker, but the system is. I didn't get into Tony Blair with Kellie, but we've gotten into it before. It was under Tony Blair's premiership. It was under his prime minister, under his on his watch, that he offered incentives to local authorities in this country based on the numbers of children they were taking into care. Financial incentives Blair's government offered local authorities. He essentially gave them targets. You're not stealing enough children. If you steal a few more, we'll give you more money. That's why so many children are being taken into care on the risk of future emotional harm. And I disagree with Kellie. There's no harm in that. When she talks about Ian Joe, I agree with Ian Joe. Says I think Kellie's wrong on that point. She'll take me up on it next time I get her on, no doubt. Absolutely wrong. If you've decided that you don't want to immunise your child, if you don't want to unleash that toxic tidal wave of shit into the undeveloped immune system, and they start asking questions, and the doctor starts saying, we're going to report you to social services, well, you better figure out really quickly just how principled is your stance on vaccinations. Because if you can let it go and allow the doctor to vaccinate the child, fair enough. But if you can't let it go because you believe that there's a good chance the vaccination is going to harm your child one way or the other, well, then you've got to run. Because they will take your child. This is the reality of it. 32,000 a year. And we know nothing about the reasons why. Because there's a veil of secrecy over it. Nobody's allowed to speak about it. Nobody. None of the participants. The poor parents, God love them, can't say a word about it. Gagged. Jail if you speak out about it. No media coverage. Nothing. So you have no idea why these 32,000 children have been taken into care. That's not fascism. There isn't a word to describe that. That sort of system where a country can do that. The only country in Europe where it goes on. Look at Barnardo's, how much it's worth. Look at adoption agencies. Look at the money they give these foster parents every week, £500-600 a week. £1 billion a year industry.